Nostradamus predicted the fall of 3 mighty nations. Is your country one of them? 3 powerful nations, long considered unshakable pillars of the modern world, may soon face a reckoning, not because of war or invasion, but because an ancient prophecy, written in shadowed verse by the legendary Nostradamus, may now be coming true. This isn't conspiracy, it's a chilling pattern written centuries ago. Nostradamus, the mystic whose predictions have echoed through time, foresaw plagues, great fires, and the fall of kings. Now, his words seem to point directly to 3 nations at the heart of global power. Which countries are at risk? Why now? And what deeper lessons can we draw from their potential fall? In this episode of The Journey of Wisdom, we don't just explore the prophecies. We ask what they reveal about our world today and how we can prepare for what's coming. Before we begin, if this kind of insight resonates with you, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Because this journey isn't just about predictions, it's about understanding the wisdom behind them. Let's walk into the pages of the past to glimpse the truths of our future. Number 1. Who was Nostradamus? Nostradamus remains one of history's most enigmatic figures, not just a man of science and stars, but a symbol of mystery that has endured for centuries. Born Michel de Nostradamus in 1503, he was a French astrologer, physician, and seer who gained lasting fame for his book Les Prophéties, a collection of over 900 4-line poetic verses known as quatrains. These writings, cryptic and metaphorical in nature, have sparked countless debates, inspired generations, and drawn both skeptics and believers into the puzzle of their meanings. What keeps people returning to his work isn't just curiosity. It's the eerie precision with which many believe his prophecies have mirrored some of history's most defining moments. From the fire and blood of Napoleon's rise to the devastating world wars of the 20th century, readers have often pointed to his verses as glimpses into the future spoken from the shadows of the past. And yet, what makes his predictions so captivating and unsettling is how deliberately ambiguous they are. They aren't roadmaps, they're riddles. He used veiled language, ancient references, and layered symbolism, making his predictions clear only in hindsight after events have already shaken the world. Among the most unsettling of Nostradamus's recurring themes is the fall of great powers. His verses hint not just at the crumbling of empires, but at a pattern, a rhythm to the rise and fall of nations. Power, he seemed to warn, is never permanent. Even the most towering nations eventually bend under the weight of time and circumstance. What's particularly haunting is his suggestion that 3 dominant global powers, each strong in their own era, are destined to fall. Not always by sudden invasion or catastrophe, but through a slower, more invisible process. Nostradamus implies that a nation's undoing often begins within. Social divisions that deepen, leadership that loses its way, values that drift from their roots. Add to that economic instability, external enemies, and a growing disconnect between leaders and the people, and the foundations begin to crack. In many ways, this message feels more relevant today than ever. We live in an age where powerful nations face not just external threats, but internal conflicts, polarization, loss of trust, environmental neglect, and a widening gap between rich and poor. And so, as we revisit these old prophecies, we're not just reading history, we're reflecting on the present. It invites us to ask deeper questions. What holds a nation together? What causes it to fall apart? And more importantly, what role do we play in its future? If Nostradamus was right about the fall of empires, then perhaps his warning isn't meant to frighten us, but to awaken us. In our homes, communities, and institutions, we each hold threads of the larger tapestry, and if we want to preserve what matters most, our freedoms, our connections, our peace, we must guard against not just external dangers, but the quieter erosion from within. Number 2. Nostradamus predicted the fall of 3 mighty nations. Nation number 1, the United States. Let's take a closer look at what many believe to be one of Nostradamus's most chilling predictions, one that could be about the United States. In Century 1, Quatrain 40, he writes, "The great empire will be torn from limb to limb by the storm of internal strife. The tower will fall by the people's hands, and the economy shall crumble under its weight." For many interpreters, this sounds less like poetic mystery and more like a stark reflection of the tensions we're witnessing in modern America. Think about it. Here, we have a country that, for much of the past century, has stood tall as a global leader in economics, culture, and innovation. But what happens when that power begins to shake from within, not from foreign threats, but from its own internal conflicts? Nostradamus doesn't describe an empire falling to invaders or collapsing from war. He describes it unraveling at its own seams. Now, consider the challenges facing the United States today: a national debt that has soared beyond comprehension, economic inequality that continues to grow, and political divisions that feel deeper and more dangerous with each passing year. Could this be what the storm of internal strife is all about? Are we already in it? When the prophecy speaks of the tower falling by the people's hands, it makes you wonder, are we the architects of our own decline? Could it be the public's disillusionment with institutions, protests born of frustration, or the erosion of trust in government and media? If the tower is a symbol for the systems we once relied on, what does it mean when even those begin to fall? The most unsettling part might be what comes next: the collapse of the economy. The United States has long held its position as the guardian of the global financial system. With the dollar as the world's reserve currency, the US has enjoyed immense influence. But what happens if that trust begins to fade? If other nations begin to trade in different currencies, or if internal dysfunction causes economic instability? Could Nostradamus' words become reality? An economy crumbling under its own weight isn't just about numbers, it's about the collapse of faith in the system, the erosion of the middle class, and the increasing gap between those with wealth and those struggling to survive. It's not just about economics, it's about people, about families, about futures. So, here's the question that matters most. Is this prophecy already unfolding before our eyes, or is there still time to change course? That's not a question with a simple answer, but it is one worth asking yourself. Every choice we make, how we vote, how we treat one another, what we prioritize as a society, shapes the future we walk into. It's easy to look at a prophecy like this and feel powerless, but the truth is, the future is never set in stone. Nostradamus may have offered a warning, but we still hold the pen that writes what comes next. If there's one lesson to take away, it's this: strength doesn't come from being invincible. It comes from learning how to heal from within. Division weakens, but unity strengthens. If internal strife is the threat, then understanding, compassion, and responsibility are the antidotes. The fall of a great nation isn't inevitable, but ignoring the warning signs could make it so. Ask yourself, what kind of future are we building, and what role do you want to play in it? Nation number 2, France. Let me take you into the heart of one of the most powerful and historically rich nations in Europe, France, and share with you a prophecy that has haunted thinkers and dreamers for centuries. Nostradamus, the enigmatic seer of the 16th century, wrote in Century 8, Quatrain 93, "The great city shall be in chaos. Fire and blood shall flood the streets. A leader shall be dethroned, and the people will turn against their own." For many who've studied his mysterious verses, this quatrain is a chilling reflection of France's past and perhaps its future. When we look at the patterns of history, doesn't it seem like France has always carried within it both the beauty of culture and the fury of revolution? Think of the storming of the Bastille in 1789, when ordinary citizens rose up and reshaped the world's understanding of power. Think more recently of the Yellow Vest movement, spontaneous, raw, and emotional. The image of fire in the streets isn't just poetic. It's something we've seen on the news, felt in the anxiety of the modern French spirit, and read in the headlines of economic protest and political tension. So, when Nostradamus speaks of the great city, many believe he is pointing directly at Paris, the heart, the soul, and sometimes the battlefield of France. Fire and blood is not just a metaphor here. It's an unsettling possibility that speaks to civil unrest, to a society pushed to its limits. What might it take for this ancient prophecy to come to life in our time? Could we already be seeing the first sparks? France today is wrestling with deep and emotional questions about who they are as a nation. Economic inequality continues to widen. Tensions around immigration and national identity fuel debates that aren't just political, they're personal. Communities are divided not only by class and culture, but by a growing sense of uncertainty and distrust. Could the leader dethroned be symbolic of a collapsing faith in political systems, or might it one day become literal, a dramatic fall of a head of state, as has happened before in French history? These are not easy questions, and there are no easy answers. But I invite you to pause here and ask yourself, what happens to a country when its people lose faith, not only in leadership, but in each other? When unity gives way to fear and the social fabric begins to fray, can it hold, or must it be torn down to be rebuilt? This is not just a prophecy, it's a mirror being held up to a society standing at a crossroads. It's easy to dismiss Nostradamus as old myth or poetic riddles, but when the patterns of the past begin to echo in the present, isn't it worth paying closer attention? From my own perspective, I believe that prophecies like these aren't necessarily warnings carved in stone. Rather, they are invitations to reflect deeply, to listen to the signs of discontent, to notice where disconnection is growing, and to ask ourselves, what kind of future do we want to shape together? The France that inspired philosophers, artists, and revolutionaries still lives, but will that spirit be channeled toward wisdom, or will it once again descend into chaos? It depends on choices made not just by governments, but by individuals, by you, by me, by communities. So now I turn this over to you. What do you think Nostradamus was truly seeing in that vision? And if France is indeed the nation in question, what role does awareness play in helping a society steer away from turmoil and toward harmony? If you've made it this far, you're clearly intrigued by the hidden truths of history and prophecy. Comment below with Truth Seeker to show you're ready to uncover the deeper meaning behind Nostradamus's chilling predictions. Stay with us until the end. There's more to reveal, and you might just discover whether your nation is among the three he foresaw falling. Don't miss what comes next. Nation number 3, China. Century 10, Quatrain 22, delivers a striking warning wrapped in poetic mystery. The red dragon shall rise, spreading its power across the world, but arrogance shall be its downfall, and it shall fall as swiftly as it rose. The red dragon, almost universally recognized as a symbol of China, represents not just a country but a rising force that has reshaped the global order. Over the last few decades, China's transformation from a developing nation to a global superpower has been astonishing. Its cities have reached toward the skies, its technology has begun to rival Silicon Valley, and its economic reach has extended far beyond its borders. Yet, according to Nostradamus, there is an ominous lesson embedded in its meteoric rise. When a nation begins to believe it is untouchable, it steps onto dangerous ground. Indeed, the challenges facing China today seem to mirror the prophet's ancient words. While the outward signs of strength remain, such as rapid infrastructure growth, global investments, and political influence, there are cracks forming beneath the surface. The economy is no longer growing at its breakneck speed. In fact, it's slowing more rapidly than expected. A major contributing factor is the aging population, a demographic time bomb created by decades of the one-child policy. Fewer young workers and an increasing elderly population could create long-term strain on the workforce and social systems. And let us not overlook the political tensions. China's territorial disputes in the South China Sea, its increasingly fraught relationship with Taiwan, and strained relations with Western powers could all trigger serious conflict. These are not just diplomatic concerns. They are flashpoints with the potential to destabilize not only China, but the wider world. Nostradamus's quatrain doesn't name dates or details, but it reminds us that every empire, no matter how grand, carries within it the seeds of its own undoing. Arrogance, unchecked ambition, and the illusion of permanence have brought down many before. And in modern times, where global economies and politics are so deeply intertwined, the fall of one great power would ripple across every continent, affecting us all in ways we may not yet imagine. So, what does this mean for us? Whether or not one believes in prophecies, it serves as a powerful call for humility. For citizens and leaders alike, the message is to balance ambition with wisdom, progress with compassion, and power with responsibility. As individuals, we can reflect on this in our own lives too. When things are going well, when success builds and recognition grows, it's easy to start believing we're invincible. But history, just like this prophecy, reminds us that growth without reflection leads to downfall. If you lead, lead with care. If you build, build with conscience. If you rise, rise with humility. For what rises quickly can fall just as fast, unless it is rooted in something deeper than power, like wisdom, balance, and the greater good. Advice: from prophecy to wisdom. After reading these three prophecies about the United States, France, and China, you might feel uneasy, even fearful. But remember this: the true purpose of a warning is not to scare us, it's to awaken us. In the spirit of Buddhist wisdom, every glimpse into the future is an invitation to return to the present, to look deeply and to transform. Number 1. Don't let fear paralyze the mind. Fear, while a natural part of being human, can become a quiet tyrant when we allow it to dominate our thoughts and choices. It's easy to feel overwhelmed in today's uncertain world. Wars rage, economies fluctuate, relationships shift, and even our inner lives can sometimes feel like unfamiliar terrain. But here's the wisdom that has stood the test of centuries. Do not let fear paralyze the mind. When fear grips us tightly, it doesn't just cloud our judgment, it also closes the doors of the heart. We stop seeing possibilities, we pull back from people, and we second-guess even the steps we were once sure of. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha reminds us, All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think we become. This is more than a poetic line. It's a roadmap out of fear's grip. When we take a breath and root ourselves in the present moment, we take back the reins. We stop letting imagined futures dictate today's peace. In times of fear, we tend to feel as if we're standing in the shadow of something enormous, something uncontrollable. But wisdom, true, grounded wisdom, invites us to look deeper. It says, yes, fear is here. Now, what will you do with it? Like the old Zen saying goes, you cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. This teaches us that life will always be full of uncertainties and discomforts, but how we respond defines our experience. In our modern lives, fear often doesn't look like a lion in the jungle. It looks like a stack of unpaid bills, a silent phone, a test result, a conversation we keep putting off. And yet, each of these moments holds the same core truth. The future is not carved in stone. We are not living out some script handed down by fate. Instead, we are painting it stroke by stroke, with every thought we feed, every word we speak, and every act of compassion or courage we offer. Even when things seem fixed, there is always space for transformation, because our awareness has the power to shift how we meet each moment. So, when fear arises, and it will, let it be a call to mindfulness, not a signal to retreat. Mindfulness doesn't erase fear, but it prevents it from becoming our master. With every breath we take in awareness, we step back into our power. The Buddha taught that fear is born from attachment to outcomes, identities, and the illusion of control. If we can gently loosen our grip on these, fear begins to lose its hold. Lao Tzu once said, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. Modern science echoes this truth. Studies in neuroscience now show how being present can calm the overactive amygdala, the brain's fear center. In other words, ancient wisdom and modern knowledge agree. Presence is the antidote to panic. It's important to recognize that fear doesn't only reside in dramatic moments. It whispers in daily decisions. Should I speak up in this meeting? Should I apply for that job? Should I tell them how I really feel? In these moments, remember, you are not powerless. Even a small, mindful action is a step toward freedom. Whether it's choosing to breathe before replying to an upsetting message, or choosing kindness when you're tempted to lash out, these small acts rewrite the story. The courage to act in alignment with your values, even in the face of fear, is a form of quiet rebellion against the forces that try to shrink us. So, to you who may be feeling anxious about the future, about a decision, about something that hasn't yet come to pass, breathe. Come back to this moment. Remember that fear is a messenger, not a master. You can listen without obeying. In doing so, you reclaim your voice, your calm, and your wisdom. You begin to realize that you're not walking a fixed path set by prophecy or fate, but instead, you're walking a path shaped by presence, choice, and intention. Let your mind be clear, your heart be open, and your actions be rooted in courage. As Thich Nhat Hanh said so simply and beautifully, smile, breathe, and go slowly. Because this moment, this one, right now, is the only place where life is truly lived and where fear, gently seen, can finally loosen its grip. Number 2, a strong nation begins with compassionate people. When we think about the strength of a nation, It's easy to focus on things like military power, economic stability, or political leadership, but what if true strength starts somewhere far more personal, within the hearts of its people? Nostradamus once warned that nations don't fall because of outside enemies, but from within. This insight invites us to shift our attention inward, to look not at the threats beyond our borders, but at the cracks forming in our collective spirit. A nation begins to unravel when trust erodes between neighbors, when honesty becomes rare, and when decisions are driven by selfish gain rather than the well-being of future generations. So let me ask you, how often do you choose compassion over convenience? How often do we as a society pause to think about the long-term impact of our actions, not just on ourselves, but on our communities, our environment, and the children who will inherit this world? If you want your nation to endure, begin by living with kindness. That's not just a poetic idea, it's a practical one. Kindness strengthens the invisible threads that hold a society together. It shows up in small moments, really listening to someone instead of just waiting to speak, being honest even when it's hard, and choosing to forgive when it would be easier to hold a grudge. These aren't grand gestures, but they ripple outward in powerful ways. They teach others how to act. They create safe spaces where trust can grow, and over time, these small acts become the culture of a people. Now think about it. When was the last time you truly felt heard, understood, or supported by someone in your community? And how did that moment affect the way you moved through the rest of your day? We often underestimate the power of a single act of goodness, but as Buddhist wisdom teaches, even a drop of water will eventually fill a bucket. Compassion isn't weakness, it's courage. It's standing firm in your values even when the world around you is loud, divided, or indifferent. It means refusing to let anger, greed, or fear shape your actions. A compassionate society doesn't mean everyone agrees. It means people learn how to disagree with respect, how to care for one another even when they're different, and how to protect what truly matters. So, what would it look like if more of us chose kindness today? What kind of nation could we help build, not just for ourselves, but for everyone? As we reflect on this, remember, the strength of a country is not measured only in wealth or weapons, but in the character of its people. True resilience comes from compassion. Real unity is born from mutual respect. And lasting peace is shaped by the everyday choices we make to treat one another with humanity. So, as you go through your day, try this simple practice. Before speaking or acting, ask yourself, will this build trust or will it tear it down? That one question could be the beginning of a stronger, more compassionate world. Because the future of a nation doesn't begin in government, it begins in you. Lesson to carry forward. A truly strong nation grows from the everyday goodness of its people. Compassion is not a luxury. It is a necessity for survival, peace, and unity. When you act with kindness, you're not just making someone's day better. You're helping to build a future where everyone can thrive. If you've made it this far, you're already walking the path from prophecy to true wisdom. Comment below with "wise journey" to affirm your commitment to deepening your understanding and living with greater clarity. Don't click away. There's still powerful insight ahead that could shift your perspective and guide your next steps. Stay with us until the end to uncover timeless wisdom that speaks directly to your life. Number 3. Lead yourself before you expect others to change. Let's take a moment to reflect on something that may sound simple, but carries a depth of truth we often overlook. before we expect others to change, whether it's our leaders, systems, or even the people around us. We have to learn to lead ourselves first. This is where real wisdom begins. It's so easy to fall into the habit of criticizing what's broken in the world. We point fingers at governments, at society, at all the external things we believe are holding us back. And while there may be truth in those frustrations, we have to ask ourselves a deeper question. Have I mastered myself before trying to master the world? The Buddha gave us a powerful reminder. Better than conquering 1,000 enemies is conquering yourself. Now think about that. What does it really mean to conquer yourself? It means facing the parts of you that are impatient, reactive, greedy, or fearful. It means cultivating the discipline to pause before speaking in anger, to listen when your ego wants to argue, and to act from kindness rather than pride. And here's the thing. This inner work is not passive. It's not about retreating from the world or pretending everything is fine. It's about transforming how you show up every single day. If you truly want to make a difference, the first battlefield is your own heart. Let your actions reflect the kind of world you want to see. Live more simply. What can you let go of that's causing clutter, stress, or distraction? Consume less. Do you really need more, or are you trying to fill an emptiness that stuff can't satisfy? Speak with honesty. Can your words be more truthful, more gentle, more healing? Act with compassion, especially when it's hard, especially when the other person doesn't deserve it, especially when you feel tired or misunderstood. That's when compassion becomes real strength. Keep a calm heart, even in turbulent times. But how do you do that when the world feels chaotic? It's not by numbing yourself or pretending the problems don't exist. It's by anchoring yourself in what you can control: your breath, your attitude, your response. And trust me, this is not weakness. This is courage. Because leading yourself means taking full responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your presence. It means asking yourself every day, am I being the kind of person I'd want to follow? And this is where true leadership starts, not in power or titles, but in presence, awareness, and intention. So I invite you to pause for a moment. What is one small way you can lead yourself better today? Maybe it's by choosing patience in a stressful moment. Maybe it's by being honest with yourself about something you've been avoiding. Maybe it's simply by offering a kind word to someone who needs it. These small steps are not small at all. They are the seeds of wisdom. And over time they grow into the kind of transformation that no government or policy can create for you. This is your power, your path. And so I ask you, what kind of world do you want to live in? And more importantly, how will you embody that vision in your own life? Because when you lead yourself with integrity, others begin to notice. You become the change that inspires others, not by force, but by example. That's how wisdom spreads, not through preaching, but through presence. Not through judgment, but through genuine care. And perhaps this is the quiet revolution the world truly needs. Number 4. Turn fear into readiness. When we hear the word prophecy, many of us instinctively imagine distant visions of doom, cataclysms, or fates sealed by ancient words. But prophecy, when rightly understood, is not about paralyzing fear, it's about preparation. True wisdom is not found in obsessing over what might happen, but in choosing how we live before it does. So let's ask a real question. What good is knowing what's coming if we don't let that knowledge make us better, braver, more awake human beings. Nostradamus, the Buddha, and even spiritual traditions across the world never gave us insights into the future simply to entertain or scare us. They offered them as lamps to illuminate our present. The storms they warned of, whether political, spiritual, or environmental, aren't meant to be countdowns to despair. They are wake-up calls, asking us to live with more clarity, more responsibility, and more love. Preparation doesn't mean hoarding supplies or building bunkers. It means building character. It means creating resilience, not just in our homes, but in our hearts. When you wake up in the morning, do you feed your mind with fear or with purpose? Do you speak words that heal or words that divide? Do you give in to hopelessness, or do you choose to plant seeds of goodness, even when the future feels unclear? Let's be honest with ourselves. It's easy to point fingers and say, the world is falling apart. But what if we asked instead, how can I hold something together today? Maybe that means being a steady presence for your children. Maybe it means reconnecting with your faith, your values, or your community. Maybe it means offering forgiveness instead of holding on to bitterness. These acts are not small. They are acts of real preparation, the kind of preparation no prophecy can replace. As Lao Tzu wrote, "Do the difficult things while they are easy, and do the great things while they are small." That is how we prepare, not when disaster strikes, but now, in the quiet daily decisions we make. And here's a deeper truth. You don't need to know what will happen tomorrow to live wisely today, because tomorrow's strength is built in today's discipline, today's kindness. So if the news leaves you anxious, if ancient predictions stir your fear, let that fear become fuel, not to panic, but to prepare your soul. Don't just wonder about the future, strengthen the person who will face it. Be the one who remains calm in a storm, truthful in a time of confusion, generous in a world that sometimes forgets how to care. You don't need to control what's coming, you just need to rise to meet it. And so, my friend, I leave you with this question. If you knew that difficult times were ahead, what kind of person would you want to become? Then don't wait. Become that person now. Because wisdom is not merely knowing what lies ahead. It's living with such courage and clarity that, whatever comes, you're already ready. And so, as we reflect on the powerful messages hidden in Nostradamus's ancient verses, let's remember, prophecy is not destiny, it's a mirror. A chance to see more clearly, to choose more wisely, and to live more intentionally. Whether or not these predictions come true, the deeper question remains, how will we respond? Will we allow fear to rule us, or will we use this insight to grow in awareness, compassion, and responsibility? If this journey has sparked something in you, whether curiosity, reflection, or even a quiet sense of readiness, then I invite you to stay connected with us. Like this video, share it with others who may find meaning in these insights, and don't forget to subscribe to the Journey of Wisdom. Make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss our next episode. Together, let's keep exploring the wisdom of the past to shape a more mindful future. Until next time, take a deep breath, stay grounded, and walk gently with awareness, courage, and compassion.